How did you find part one of the Embedding DEI in Evolving Times podcast episode? If you haven't heard it, I urge you to go back and listen to last week's episode before you listen to this one. So, assuming you have listened to it, you'll have heard we started to talk about the fear that's starting to creep into places around DEI, and also the fact that, you know, just as with the United States of America, there have been companies that have dropped their DEI efforts, and this is having an impact on freedom of speech. It's having an impact in terms of how people are starting to look at different communities in society. And so the conversation is about to now go into the flags that we're seeing on the streets of the UK, and how the leaders in this conversation are dealing with that vibe entering the workplace. So without further ado, here is part two. Yeah, who are we prioritizing? Who are we not?
Silence can be very loud as well. I think there are some things which you need to address. You know, societally, we all want to talk about them, but like I said, we are in a political environment, we are in a work environment, and it's difficult to turn around and be damned if you do and damned if you don't. And I always say, whenever someone comes to me and says, you must have the best job in the world because you get to tell people, and like, it's one of the hardest ones I've ever experienced, because for everyone who wants to go that way, there is another group of people trying to pull you in the opposite direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And on a large scale, for example, the University of Birmingham has over 8,000 staff, over 43,000 students.
Wow. You
can imagine what diversity looks like in a university like that, and what role does the university play in that? So yeah, that is, things are really changing at the moment. I can feel it in the air.
Yeah. And as you say that, we talk about the air, and I what comes to mind are the flags at the moment, doing their thing around Birmingham. Certainly where I live in the north of Birmingham, they're very prominent. And ordinarily, you know, that wouldn't be an issue, you know, but we know that, you know, we've had a summer of there being protests outside hotels that house migrants. And so there's been a lot of damaging rhetoric that's been taking place, right? So with regards to that, because we can't ignore it, and as I said, what we're not trying to do is to get into the politics of it. However, some of this does come into the workplace. So we're knowing that these flags, these St. George's flags, are being displayed widely across Birmingham and around the country. If issues arise in your organisations as a result of this, how do you plan to address their impact? I'll tell it to you.
Yeah, so for us, it's so actually, I drove into Birmingham today. I was quite shocked. So I've been in a school in Northfield today, and I was quite shocked. I felt for the kids who were walking to school with those flags. So, but actually, the headmaster there was sort of saying, actually, the kids haven't brought any of that in, that they haven't felt it. But I'm like, it's interesting. But for us, so we're based in Leamington Spa. It is, I mean, let's face it, the county council is a reform council, mainly because of locally, it's very liberal and Greens. In the north, it's Nuneaton, Bedworth, we're heavy reform. So there's a kind of duplicity in terms of support for kind of the flags. But on our road, there is a hotel that house refugees. We tried to work with them because lots of people don't work in our office on a Friday, and we've got a kitchen. So we try to work with the refugees to allow them to cook their meals in our building. So we have tried to establish a relationship with them. But there is an issue that we've had to create business continuity plans for if the hotel gets attacked. What does that mean for our employees? Like, how do we send them home? How do we get them home safely? How do we access our business materials, which are in that building? You know, so the first time it happened, we take kit into schools. We build stuff. Right, so we have got 50 sets of kit in a different building off-site that we can go to, and our staff are not affected by it. but obviously, like these guys are from a massively large organization. I've got like 50 workers and like 300 volunteers, and you know what I mean? So it's a hugely different scale, but we've had to be really practical about it. And then what we do is I'm on the local police space to make sure that I get notified if there's any issues, so that we can then tell our staff not to come in. So it's really, really prevalent in that respect. However, from a day-to-day basis, I mean, the only conversations that we've had is the fact that someone put a George Cross over a roundabout, which seems like the most idiotic thing, because you then drive over it every day. So I'm not sure about nationality and driving over anyway. But conversationally, it's been fairly light-hearted, but it's certainly where we are, and a lot of our staff working, from Coventry, it is not as prolific as it is here.
Yeah, so let's talk about it here. Marcel, what are your thoughts?
So I saw something quite interesting on social media that I find British culture is quite good at getting the worst of things and making something better. But on roundabouts and signs where people are doing this, some people are actively going out in support of the refugees and turning them into Battenberg cakes by painting parts of them pink. Genius. That's British culture for you. I think a lot of this comes as well from, especially in Birmingham, where we've seen the Palestinian flag being flown, and this is a response to it. Well, I won't go to the politics of it and how the council stands for this, but everyone has the right to their nationality, but everyone has the right to represent themselves. But if that right is to purposely cause harm to someone else, you've got to ask yourself, why are you doing this? So many of the flags I've seen the word England upside down. I've even seen an actual Georgian flag, which is the St. George flag, but with additional on. And it's the pride people have for something which St. George never set foot on this country. Turkish, buried in Palestine.
It's patron saint for all Palestine as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And some places in Africa as well.
Yeah.
And that's fine. It's patron saint, but the fact of the matter is that people will get behind this flag, and it empowers certain acts. It empowers going to a hotel and telling people that they're not welcome here. It's a dangerous rhetoric, I think, at the end of the day.
So drawing that back to the workplace, if you see that some of this impacts playing out amongst students, amongst staff, given your role, what do you think you have the power to do?
I think that, again, we can't, it's really difficult actually. We haven't had any students back on campus yet. They're coming back. Well, we have got students on campus, but the majority of them are coming back in a couple of weeks. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But I think people automatically run for security, right? It's like, oh, there's going to be flags that we have to go to security now. That automatically ignites like a worry in people, I don't have any issue with people being proud of where they come from, right? But why are you doing it? And are you doing it to make other people feel inferior? So if we see that play out, it's okay. Well, you have to investigate. We always investigate things. If we see we have, because of the diverse student body that we have, I've heard of inequality regimes, or people putting up posters that are problematic, and then we have to investigate. We have to find out the root source, and we have to tackle it at the source. And that's not, you can't police people for putting up a flag, but it's about what ideologies are you bringing with that flag, or why are you doing it? Are you doing it because you're proud? I'm very proud, but this is a space for all. We have international students, we have students from lots of different backgrounds. So it's a real thing about, I think, first investigating about what's going on, and then nipping it at the root cause. We've got a very good investor. We're good at investigating at the University of Birmingham and finding out root causes in people, because a institution that big, you have to swipe in and you have to, we can find people. It's about figuring out why that's necessary on campus. And we're looking, I don't think that we've seen anything on campus, but you step outside of campus and it's everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the reason I asked this question is I think inevitably it will come into the organisations. And I said this other day on social media that I think whether it's overt racism, whether it's through sly means or whether it's through unconscious ways that people aren't really aware of, all this media attention, all these flags, the reason behind the flags, that's all been absorbed
But
by
I think
people.
it has to be not ignored.
Yeah.
I think the problem is that it is, like you can go on campus and ignore it. And therefore you're like, well, we're in this safe haven and it's all right. And actually it's not all right.
No.
You have to have that conversation to make sure that your place is that safe space for people to come. And so you can't police it in its entirety, but you do have to at least acknowledge what's going on.
Yeah. And that includes just speaking to each other, right? It's just saying to a colleague, you're okay. Particularly, colleagues that you think might be impacted by it in some way,
So important.
This is where the individual comes into it, right? It's not always about the institution. It starts with the individual.
Yeah.
Are you okay? Like, what's going on? And we have spoke about it in the office between us, just checking in on people. I think that's where the humidity comes in, right? Just, are we okay? So
I want to share what an organisation did last year. So last year we had the riots, and so we were due to go into an organisation in London to deliver some anti-racism training, and it's a mixed group. They're a trauma-informed organisation, so they're very conscious of people's feelings. And what the leader of that organisation did, because she was very aware of what had just happened and it would have an impact particularly on racially marginalised staff, she said, can I have a conversation with them initially just to see how they feel, to kind of set the guidelines for the training, which is great. We actually got to that session and there was so much angst, so much worry, so much fear, so much pent-up feeling that I asked the question, do you actually even want to do this training? And they said no. And so I went back, communicated that, and the head of HR was absolutely fine with that. Fine, they don't need to do it. And instead what happened is they were given a well-being day. And so, that's quite a creative way of doing it. But it shows how in tune that leader and ready that leader was to do something different, to listen to the feelings of the people within the organisation. I think, again, it just goes back to checking in with people.
It's really nice to hear that people are acting in that way, because organisations don't act, they act as machines.
Yeah.
But it's run by humans.
Yeah.
So, being able to just stop the training, it's okay. You will take the hit.
Yeah.
But just go and look after yourself. Yeah.
And I understand that was a small organisation, but there are things that large organisations can do. So I'm thinking now with the University of Birmingham, we run some, it's called Space to Think About Race sessions for staff. So there's a space for them to kind of air to what they're feeling, and they do. And again, that's what I'd say to people who are listening, people who are in the room, that if you are a leader or in any of these positions, that at the very least offer space and recognise there is a need for those safe spaces. And I know it's something that's said all the time, but it's so important.
I just wanted to note something on that, and I know that the University of Birmingham is a very different organisation compared to the two organisations on the panel, but we have a chaplaincy. So we have a multi-faith chaplaincy that we have volunteer chaplains come in. And just this morning I was talking about how important it is for chaplains to be able to understand the political nature of what's going on and be able to support students that are probably going through some of this and they don't know where to go to. It's not a university problem. They may have something in them that they need to just talk about. And our chaplaincy is to people that are align with the faith and people that don't, as a well-being space, and the chaplaincy is within my team, and we're trying to create a real safe space that's outside of the university where you can just be, where it's not attached to academic excellence or whatever. It's just a space to be, but then that space has signposting, so people can signpost to wellbeing teams and support services and whatnot. And I think that it's those spaces of finding where people feel the most safe to express themselves, and that might be in lots of different places. But we have to recognise that people are feeling feelings, and it needs to come out somewhere, and they have to talk to. They need to talk to people.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to ask a question that's not on the card that you haven't had before. Can I ask it?
Go on.
On then.
So, and it's just about safe spaces. So I think you all know the answers. I think it's really important for people to hear, what do we mean by safe spaces? What constitutes a safe space? Because, you know, we can say it, but what I know is that some people don't realize that means that not everybody can always be in the room at the same time. You know, it means lots of different things. So just anybody that wants to pick up on that.
I think so for us, it's really interesting as an organisation. So we do these engineering challenges, and it's all about fun in failure. So you're like building this engineering stuff, and you're going to fail, and it's all going to go wrong. And it's supposed to be a safe space. It's a very different safe space to what we're talking about in this, in terms of which is much more about emotions and feelings and in your head and how people talk to each other. And actually, for me, getting the teams to shift from that idea of what a safe space to learn in and get educated in and fail in, to understanding cultural humility, and I got it there, being able to have those conversations and giving people the space to admit what they don't know and don't understand and know they don't get. It is quite a huge shift, because it was almost like, oh, actually, we know what safe spaces are and we do this all the time. It's just, and that kind of like 3-point turn of, you get the sense of what a safe space is and the importance of it, but this is an importance thing in a different conversation and a different sense of that. And I found that journey to be, you know, like I was saying earlier about the different speeds that people are going on, that alone has been an interesting journey for a lot of people to go on, because they haven't had to have the conversation about, oh, I'm not sure about race and I don't really understand transgender. All they've needed to understand is what are different spaces. And so they feel some pride in the fact that they now can have these conversations. It's so minuscule, you know what I mean? Like, oh, bless you, you're very far on the, you know, well done, you've got to the starting line. But it's a positive thing. So, yeah, sorry to jump in on that one, but it's safe spaces now are talked about so frequently in different bits, but it's understanding what it means in terms of this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I do something similar. Our team, we have break it to make it sessions where we create something. We are in a safe space that we attack our own work, and we encourage each other to do this. And we go in with the fact is it's never personal. We're doing it now before the public or our workforce can do it, because we want to go out there with our best foot forward. We want to be able to justify why we're doing X because we've considered Y, Z, A, B, C. So that's one of the safe spaces we do from a learning and development perspective. But I think having a moment of need, so that's either having...
I know you're enjoying the episode, but I've just got to tell you this. If you're wanting your organisation to transform with regards to diversity and inclusion, you need to check out our Crafting Compassionate Cultures online learning hub. It includes our 4 CPD accredited online courses, including one around anti-racism, microaggressions, sexual harassment, DEI, and more to come. It includes team leader packs so you can have discussions with team members about the learning. Our HR integration toolkit, so you know exactly how to roll out this program, and it's got email templates and more. Certificates of completion, monthly learning reports, a monthly expert-led Q&A, and bite-sized videos, and so much more. Want to find out more and to trial it for 1 day free of charge, no questions asked? Visit our website www.strawberrywords.co.uk. That's strawberrywords.co.uk. Now back to your episode.
Training, that is having resources, that is having spaces where people can go and ask questions, like be sensitively curious about things. It's different horses for different courses. It's, I can't turn around and say, okay, let's talk about racism and bring people into a room and you can say what you wish about it, because that isn't how everybody wants to learn and that isn't how everybody wants to talk about it. So we're building right now an internal SharePoint site where we're going to create a repository of far more stuff than is probably ever going to be used, but it means that different people can choose like a pick and mix what they want. They can go and either speak to someone like a human library or go and watch something on their own, because like I said, the first step is usually the hardest one, because you have to admit that you don't know something. Pronouns, the amount of people who still don't get them. And so, but once you're able to have that conversation of why they're so important to some people, then the light switches on in their mind. So giving them that space to fail in private, where they can learn, have that cultural humility to say, okay, I didn't know this. Now I know I can do better. I think that's really important for safe spaces, because no one likes to look like they don't know what they're talking about.
And again, I bring cultural humility back, because we just, and I think this is why I want everyone to just know about it, because once you realize you can fail in that safe space, you can continue the learning or start the learning, but a lot of people just don't have that. Did you want to come in on that?
I just think that there's two things that I both panelists said most things that I want to say, but there was two things that I thought I should also say. Is one is around physicality of space. Quite often what's around people doesn't feel like a safe space. So for example, just using my own work, people can, in a chaplaincy, for example, coming in and seeing other religious items that may not necessarily correlate to your beliefs may make people think, oh, I don't quite feel safe in this space. Language is another huge thing. Listening more than talking sometimes. A safe space is just, you can talk to me, and listening and letting people get things out, and trying to find some commonality so that people feel that you're a safe space. And I'm talking about face to face here, not so much online, but that there's something that they can connect with you about. And that requires vulnerability. Big on vulnerability. Yeah. Everybody has to be vulnerable if we're creating safe spaces, And
it's scary for a lot of people, isn't it?
Very scary. Vulnerability is so scary. We don't talk about it enough. Safe spaces require vulnerability, and that's life.
Yeah, and that's, I suppose, the one thing I want to add to that, with regards to race in particular, what I find most organisations don't have is any form of racial safeguarding policy. And I think once you have an awareness that there's a need for a racial safeguarding policy, I think you then become more conscious about the type of spaces that need to be created. Yeah. I'm going to start to bring this to a close. This has been really, really insightful. I think what's coming out is that none of this is easy, but it does, again, it takes that vulnerability. It takes leaders to be brave to do this work. It's even for yourselves, this is not easy. So I would like you to communicate for leaders. My question is this: what message to leaders feeling pressure, whether political, financial, or from their workplace, to scale back their DEI ambitions? What would your message be to them? Does that make sense? I kind of said that backwards, but yeah.
I think I said it a little bit earlier when I said about finding the proverbial hook for each leader. There is value in belonging. There is value in diversity and inclusion. Now, there's multiple stats to prove that organisations which are more diverse produce better results. They have better well-being in their staff. That you get, especially with Gen Z and Gen Alpha coming up, I think an organisations need to recognise that people are making decisions not about how much money goes in their pocket, but I think what their well-being is. They are considering how an organisation represents themselves.
Yeah.
I have a line where I would say I wouldn't work for XXX in that industry. And gone are the days that we just want a job. So if we want the best talent, if we want to be able to encourage people to bring their whole self to work as much as they want, I think that line is everyone should be able to bring their whole self to work. Some people don't want to do that. That's their prerogative, but the space should be there for them to be able to do if they want. If they don't want to engage in it, that's absolutely their choice. But whilst it seems that there's a retraction around this, I think it's because a lot of people haven't seen the value in it. So I think our jobs is to demonstrate the value, put it on paper, make it virtually impossible to turn around and say, actually, we're going to remove that budget. The small budget you place there is going to pay dividends down the line.
Yeah.
This is an investment. I've managed to make a career of myself of working into all the parts of organizations which retract all their budgets. So learning and development, EDI, so I've been made redundant a few times in my career. But when an organization suddenly realizes, do you know what? We need to change our culture. Those are the two things they tap on straight away. We aren't investing in our people, so we need to do some more learning and development. Okay, but our people are diverse and we're not really getting the representation of the city we serve or our customers. So we need to look at diversity and inclusion.
Yeah.
So it's just that continuous loop. If we're going to do that, be brave, stick the course, because it will come back around. I guarantee you it will.
Thank you.
So before I start going into this, I have to say that my background is in business. So my ultimate bottom line, if I'm talking to a leader, is okay, but you have to understand the people that you serve. Every business has a customer base. If you don't understand your customer base, how are you going to sell to them? How are you going to engage them? And without that, your company isn't operating, is it? Because in university terms, students are the customers. In business terms, it could be actual customers, it could be consumers. If you don't understand these people, how are you ever going to engage them? And nobody is the same, right? We all have different, like if we talk about diversity, everyone is very different. There is no two people that are the same. The more diverse your workforce is, the more likely you are to have people that might be able to help you engage with a set of customers. So if we're talking about bottom line and simply, you have a duty to serve your customers, in whatever context. Then how do you do that? Well, you need a diverse workforce, you need representation, you need people in decision-making positions that, can support connecting with the customers. That's why representation is important, because bottom line, businesses need to succeed. Without your customers, there is no business. So that's why I always use as a bottom line, or I think that's how I think. But it's, again, similar to what Swedivan said. It's the why. Why are we doing this? Why is it important? And it's that connecting the why and connecting that why with the people that are making the decisions and making them understand this is why we're doing what we're doing to boost business productivity, essentially. And I think that's basic bottom line in business. Don't know your customers, how you're going to operate, and future face and make sure that you're sustainable, essentially.
Yeah. Thank you.
I suppose I would disagree slightly with those. I agree with the premises of what you're saying in terms of, DEI is good because we've had decades of experience of research showing what a diverse group of people bring. But fundamentally, what's coming over from America is they're not interested in it. And most of those things like Rolls-Royce are changing their strategy because they want to sell in America. So with all the research in the world, there ain't going to be any changes to certain people's behaviours and beliefs because of what anyone says. And so for me, it's much more around the bravery around it. You just, if this is your course of action, I run a charity. They know it's important to me. As a CEO, it is something that I am sticking to. And, and I'm held accountable to it by my board, by my staff, and by the students that I serve. And I think for me, the reality is that research doesn't seem to matter. bottom lines are impacted because of the US economy. And so fundamentally, it just comes around about bravery of leadership. And I think that's partly why we've got the problems with the flags of, a lot of things is just the bravery of leadership. And if you can't be brave as a leader, you shouldn't really be leading.
I can't say much to that. The only thing I want to say to add to that is something you said, Marcel, and I'm going to wrap this up now, is around the Gen Z, I think you mentioned.
Yeah, Gen Z and Gen A.
Yeah. And their concerns, because they're coming up into the workplace and they care about this. And so, again, I think that it's extremely important, because if you miss that, then you've got a dying workforce.
Although I did read a somewhere stat that apparently 80% of them have spoken to their managers. Their parents have spoken to their managers.
Oh, wow.
Yes. I'm waiting for that phone call. 80% of the next generation of young people coming into the workforce, their parents has spoken to their manager.
Is that because there's a lack of skill set in them feeling confident to reach out? Or?
I have no idea, and I'm very interested to see them.
That's something we can all find out. On that note, I am going to bring this to a close. We've had a really patient audience. Thank you so much. And I want to thank you all so much. I have a little gift for you, and I've just left it in the other room, so I'll get it for you afterwards. But I really want to thank you for your insight, for your bravery, because I know it's not easy being out here. And I hope that the audience, that you've all got something to take away as well. There aren't enough spaces to have this conversation, and we're hoping that we can do this, if not, at least once a year. But to have the space. But we're always having these conversations online. But just to say thank you so much. And this is the end of the first in-person live Compassionate Cultures podcast episode. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Fascinating episode, right? Right. There will be more as always. So the podcast is now back. This is season 3. And there will be more interviews with leaders about these important moments of change. And I will, of course, continue to educate listeners on cultural humility, on diversity, equity, and inclusion and related issues. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.